Welcome back. Today we are talking with Regina Phelps. Regina, you started to talk about executives and what they're talking about now. Can we touch on that now?
Yeah, that'd be great. Well, one of the things that I've noticed is that in all of my years of practice, I have never really seen executives focused on the concept of resiliency or continuity or crisis management, with some very rare exceptions. And that might be after some big, gigantic incident like 9/11 or maybe Hurricane Katrina or something like that that had a big impact. But now I tell you that every executive I talk to, the word resiliency just flows out of their mouth. Like I'm just shocked, to be honest with you. I just don't have any recollection of this being the word of the day. And I think part of that, to be honest with you, is also driven by if you follow any of the blogs by McKinsey or Deloitte and Touche or Ernst and Young or people like that, they're pushing this word constantly. And now it's really, given all the things that we just talked about, it's really resonated with executives. And another reason it's so resonated is because of the questions and queries by board members. So it has really escalated to a whole new place. And it's just amazing to me. And I think it's a great opportunity for us. I don't know if this is a permanent change. I kind of have a hard time believing it would be, but maybe it will, because it certainly is something that I see every single day in the executives that I work with. Are you seeing the same sort of thing in the client population that you have?
Well, yes and no. I know you and I talked before we came on air. There are some that, yes, are really looking into, we need to get working closer together. We need to, build some resiliency into our plans, processes, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's others that still see it as a tick box.
Yeah.
So it's a wide cross section, with that. But I know those that are thinking of a tick box, it's going to come back to bite them, and they're going to have to change the way they're thinking.
Right. And certainly there are people that have wanted to hire us over the years that are just doing something like an exercise or want a plan written or something like that, or an evaluation, just because they are trying to tick a box. And I am not interested in box ticking myself. I'm trying to make a difference. I'm trying to make people more resilient. I'm trying to make a difference in the world. And the way you do that is you have to really embrace this work and not just think it's about ticking a box. So I'm totally with you on that. Well, I think this is a great opportunity for all of us in our field to really stop and think about how we can really capitalize on this unique moment, because executives are engaged like never before, which can be also good and bad news. I'm not saying it's all great news, because sometimes, they have convoluted ideas. And so, and that's why how you proceed can be a little tricky. Because sometimes they either sat on a plane next to somebody who gave them a lot of information, or they read something in a publication and maybe they didn't quite get it quite right. So I think it's important, first of all, to really jump on this moment, but you need to really think about how you start out. And I ask lots of questions. A lot of my clients will take a statement or a request from an executive as just, that's the only thing they're going to get. And I don't do that. I want to keep asking questions about, what are you really concerned about? And why do you want to do this? And the idea is the more questions you could ask, then you can actually peel back and really have a good understanding about what they do understand, but also what they're really concerned about. And maybe when you start digging, you'll find like maybe they're really concerned about the impacts on reputation and brand. And maybe that's because they don't know anything about the communication strategy, or maybe they don't understand what happens below them when a crisis occurs. And I think part of that is that there's always a lot of assumptions that in a crisis, the executive is going to be the person that really takes charge. But in reality, in a large corporation, they're not taking charge of the tactical response. They're leading the strategic initiatives and making those decisions. And I think if they don't know what their job is, because no one's ever trained them, they've ever been in an exercise, then they are making a lot of assumptions and nobody ever course corrects for them. And so I think the first thing that you can do is that when you have an executive team that's interested, it's really important to really understand deeply what they're concerned about, understand what they think a crisis actually is, because they may have a totally different set of definitions that you might have out of a BIA, for example. And so the other thing is it gives you the great opportunity to explain your crisis management program to them. And if it's like we set up in most of my clients that are large, is that the executives have a very, very strategic job at the top of the food chain. They're not running the tactics. There should be a well-designed crisis management team below them that is tactical in nature, that's comprised of the usual cast of characters, anything from facilities and security and HR and IT and InfoSec and the key lines of business and finance and legal and comms and so on. And then below that, there are people that are actually doing the work that comes out of the tactics, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's important to really understand how, because you might be at that moment training them in real time about how your program works, what their role is. And when I talk about what their role is, I basically say that executives have 4 jobs, always. The first one is establishing strategic policy and directions and really having that strategic view across both the view of the company, but also the strategic decision-making that needs to happen. They might be setting policy, changing policy, those kinds of things. So that's very important at the top. Then the second thing down is that they might be signing authority for those people below them if it exceeds their limits. So if you're all had a cyber attack and now you have to go out and buy a bunch of servers, you're talking about a lot of money you didn't plan, and that's going to be signed by an executive from that level. The third thing that their job is, and I believe is frankly the most important job in many ways, is what I call a key relationship manager. They are the people that are going to be talking to your big customers, executives. They're going to be talking to government regulators, let's say, or key investors, or maybe you're having them talk to like a mayor or a governor, because they are talking at that level. So a big person from your company talking to the other big person, whatever category they fall into. And so I would expect your tactical crisis management team to be serving up these names if you need to call these people. And that would be super important. And the last thing of their job is, if it's bad enough, I would expect that not every press interview or press conference, but certainly some of them, one of the spokespersons would be the CEO. Because if it's really bad, you need mom or dad to be there giving the message. And that's really important. So they have 4 key jobs, and that's what they should be trained to. And that's what they should be exercised. But I'll tell you, many of my clients don't engage the executives because there's a lot of assumptions. Oh, they know what they're supposed to do. Well, no, they don't, because they don't really know what's happening below them. And therefore, they think they might have to do all of that too.
Yeah. Or they're afraid of their executives because of the culture. Thou shalt not go and interrupt or disturb or rock the boat with executives.
Well, and I'll tell you, I've seen that in actual real crises where my clients say, they just walked in and they took over. Well, did you ever train them to their job? Were they ever in an exercise? Well, no. Well, of course they took over, because they don't know what their job is.
Yep. And they don't know their job is, and they don't have confidence that anyone else does because it's never been communicated to them.
Correct. And so this is a great opportunity. It can be a little dangerous, right? When an executive is really primed and ready to go, but at the same time, it's a great opportunity. But you have to be really charged up and clear about what you need to communicate, and you need to be able to say it all like in little short vignettes, right? It's like the elevator speech.
Yeah.
So it's like the 4 things I just talked about. You should be able to spit those out in your sleep with giving good examples, so that this is your job. You have 4 jobs. Everything else is managed below you. Great. Okay, what are my 4 jobs? You better be able to spit them out right now. And so that's really important. So I think because they're engaged like never before, we have a great opportunity, and we need to be prepared for the moment. And if you don't run into them in the elevator, you need to find a time to try and get on their calendars to talk about this, because they are interested. And so I always say to people, start by aligning your glossary. And what do I mean by that? In our industry, even talking to colleagues, people still call all kinds of things different, right?
Huh?
So what I always do, just infuriates me after all these years. what I always do with my clients, and I would do this with a CEO team, is I say, okay, get out a piece of paper. I want you to draw 4 boxes. Okay, let me talk about these 4 boxes. The first box is emergency response. Emergency response means, dealing with emergent life safety issues, how you can actually prevent somebody from being seriously injured or die in the first few minutes or the first few hours. That's box number 1. Box number 2, business continuity, how you recover mission critical, time sensitive business processes. Great. Next one, disaster recovery or information technology recovery, how you recover all of your technology and key assets. And that's where you're going to find information security, which of course they're all over because of cyber issues. And then the last one, crisis communications, which is what you communicate to your key stakeholders. And then I say, draw an umbrella at the top. All 4 of those things shoot up into the top umbrella, which is crisis management. I know that communicators call their work crisis management. It's not. It's communications. And so I align the glossary so that when we start talking, we're all in the same boat.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't do that, then you're going to be actually stuck using the kind of words that they're using, but you can educate them in a very easy way. And that's what we always do. It sort of puts us on the same page.
Yeah, because every leader I've ever talked to, half of them, they meld, I should say, sorry, business continuity with DR. It's the same thing.
Right, exactly. They don't understand. They don't understand. And so use that opportunity to educate them with something really simple, really short, so that they understand. And that way that when you're talking, now you're all talking the same language instead of what they think it is and you think it is, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, this goes back to how we look at crisis management, which really is, and this is out of the ISO standard, which is it's a holistic management process that identifies potential impacts, threats to the organization, and a framework for building response or resilience and managing any incident. So, I mean, that's what we're looking for is crisis management. It is the holistic thing. It's the umbrella at the top of all of those other things. And that's frankly what they need to be thinking about and spending a lot of their time in. So this gives you a great opportunity, both in executive education. And so, how do you do that? Sharing, first of all, they love benchmarking. That's the word that they love more than anything else. They love benchmarking. They like hearing about other organizations. So what does that mean? You should be thinking about using Google Alerts. I love Google Alerts. So go to Mama Google, and what you do is you simply type in Google Alerts, and then magically you can actually search for any item. So you might say, let's say you're in manufacturing, and you say manufacturing, ransomware, Canada. Great. Every day, Mama Google will send you any article, any kind of thing that's in the news about those 3 topic areas. So think about that in relationship to getting information that you can share with your executives. Because you can always say, oh, gee, I saw this article and thought you might be interested. Great. Mm-hmm. What does that do? That tells you that you're knowledgeable, that you know how to get information, and that you know what they're interested in. To me, that is the most passive form of what I call covert marketing you could ever get, but really works. Benchmarking and learning about other organizations. So you try and find other colleagues that are in the similar type of field and share information. You may not say who they are when you're sharing the information with your executive, but you can say, in this type of industry that has this kind of market share and this kind of revenue stream, and they are in these many countries, they have these kinds of issues and they are solving them this way or whatever. That can be super helpful as well. They love knowing what other people are doing because nobody wants to be the first and they don't want to be the last, but they want to be like in the 25 percentile at the top. So that can be very helpful. Giving examples of other organizations, how they either managed a situation well or not so well, can be helpful. And that's where, again, networking with your colleagues, when you go to conferences like DRJ, or you belong to something like DRE in Canada, or BCI, or other groups like that, when you can share information, again, you're bringing back a story, you're bringing back an example that's really helpful about how things were managed or handled. You don't have to give names, but you can just give them some sense of the kind of industry and the size is very helpful. And many times people might say to me then, okay, if I'm well stocked with a lot of this information, they might say, but we're different. Or, like my clients in in education will say, but Regina, we're really smart. We're just going to figure it out. Yeah, right. How's that working for you?
And that's
Right.
what every other organization says.
We're so smart. Yeah. Oh my God. Oh my God. So, part of it is that you need to be prepared to understand that there'll be pushback and you need to have the right responses. I know you're really smart, but after many years of practice, I can tell you that you do much better if you have a plan and a process and people have practiced and they know what their job is. And that's what we need to be selling all the time, because you'll hear that every opportunity you get. And this really gets down to training. And for executives, it might be a tiny little, you have to basically take your, boil the ocean, put it into 45 minutes or an hour to train them. But remember, they only have 4 jobs. So that's what you're training them to. And then you're training them as to what happens below them. And then exercises. I always make sure if I do a crisis management team exercise for the tactical team, that we have a couple of executive briefings that are 15 minutes each that are in the format of the exercise. The executives know what the exercise is in advance because I give them a preparatory 1-page statement that says what the exercise is, so that when they join, they enroll and they can play. And they love it, which is sort of shocking to me because then they learn what their job is.
Well, there's actually something I want to mention about that. Maybe you've experienced it. I've been at a couple of places, one even now, where they've brought in external help to run exercises, which is fine, with the leadership. So leadership goes through it, but they don't leverage or haven't leveraged the actual plans in the organization.
That's
They've
terrible. They should be fired.
They've used their own ideas and their own processes or whatever. So there's never a connection between what leadership is being educated on versus what the organization is developing.
That's ridiculous. Because what you see, what an exercise is to me in the 3,700 or something I've done in my life, what I will tell you is an exercise is the most important thing you do in your work, and you are training people about how they respond in an event. That's what an exercise does. And if you don't train them to what you actually do, you have actually thrown away that opportunity, and you have trained them incorrectly because they're going to remember the exercise.
Yeah.
And that's how they're going to think it's runs. So they should slap them. I mean, that's terrible. When we do an executive exercise, they only see me kind of at the beginning as I frame the story. I designed the whole thing, of course, but I talk about the rules of the game, how we're going to play together, etc. But what I do is that when anybody is delivering the information, it's not me. It's the person that would really deliver the information in the real incident. So they know exactly who's going to be talking to them, how it's going to be managed, and they're going to be talking about exactly what they're doing below them. And they come forward with also a list of asks. I need you to do the following things. I need you to call these 4 major companies who are really upset with us. I need you to be able to approve these talking points. I need you to be able to XYZ. You are training them related to your plan, and that's what every exercise you do should be about.
Yeah. I found out when they were running a cyber exercise, I found out after the fact that they had a company come in with executives do a cyber event. I said, well, that's great. Did you involve, and I named, crisis management and all these other teams. I said, with the plans that we have in place, did you reference them at least, so they knew? And they went, no, that's not what happened. And I went, what?
That's terrible.
So
That's terrible.
I said, there's a big disconnect here you've just created.
Right. That should never happen.
Yeah. I wanted to point that out just to see what you had to say about that.
Well, you're not surprised, are you?
No, I'm not.
Oh gosh. I think what I want to end with is really talking about this idea of an operational crisis. I mean, we are certainly in a time right now that there's a lot going on. And so because there is so much going on, your executives need to understand the structure that's going to respond. They need to understand what's going to be going on. They need to have authorities granted. And ideally, again, going back to what you just said, you are always training them and getting ready and using the practices that you have. And so that's why, again, educating them at the beginning is important. Your processes are probably good and work. They need to understand what they are, and then they can adjust accordingly. And so this organization really needs an integrated team, and that's what we're talking about. If it's a large company, you're having a strategic team at the top, a tactical team below, and the structure's got to be able to make sense. It's got credibility, it's got judgments built in, it's got It's got authorities. I want to see authorities about what people can do. And that's super important. And I want to say, because the world is melting down before our eyes, you had better have a good bench. Many of my clients do not build a good bench. I'm talking about 1 or 2 backups always. Because I mean, I have some of my clients right now that are managing events in many, many different parts of the world, and they are frying themselves to death. And that's on top of a 3.5-year pandemic, almost 4-year pandemic. So I'm concerned about people's mental health. I'm concerned about burnout. I'm concerned about people trying to do everything. And when I look at somebody's face and I can see that vacantness in their eyes and their cheeks are kind of hollow, I'm thinking like, oh my God.
Mm.
And
Well,
I'm
it's also, I don't know how anyone could expect 1 or 2 people, because that's usually the size of many resilience or business continuity or disaster teams, to be
right.
able to focus on so many multiple situations around the globe. We've potential, we could have flight impact soon if that volcano goes off in
Right, with Iceland, yeah.
We could have an impact to Europe again. We've got riots in Ireland. There's wars going on. Other political events happening. 1 person or 2 people just can't focus properly on all of those. They're skimming the surface, and that's it.
Well, and that's where you also are really pulling in and utilizing, if you have such things as a global security operations center, ideally, hopefully they've got a good assessment tool, or pulling out information so that you can actually have real-time data. All of that kind of stuff needs to be integrated if you have those other components, because we all, to your point, Alex, we can't keep doing this and still be a whole person, right?
Yeah.
I can't emphasize that enough. And that's, I think,
We've got 2 minutes left.
I know. Okay, so we're not going to talk about this. We're going to speed through this. We'll talk about it next time.
Okay.
But what I do want to talk about, just in closing, is the issue of chronic and persistent stress. See that little guy on the far right? That's what I'm hoping our professional colleagues don't look like. And I'm concerning that they're actually getting to that burned out stage. We'll talk about some of those other surveys next time we get together. But I do want to ask all of you to really do some deep thinking about your own physical and mental health, your colleagues that you work with, and be very aware of chronic and persistent crises and the impacts they have on you. So the exhaustion mentally and physically, the health-related issues that happen, how it desensitizes you to stress, and you don't even know that you're being bombarded anymore. We talked a little bit about that before we even started, that people are just constantly sucking up all this awful news, and we are just in overdrive. And I think that's an issue. That means we're not able to be very empathetic or sympathetic, and we're irritable and cranky. People might drink more, they might use drugs, they might disconnect from people. There might be a lot of employee turnover, and you have a crappy quality of life. So I beg my clients, please take care of yourself. If you need additional people, you can't all be on call every night. You can't all be responding to everything, because then you're going to look like the guy on the right. And that happens. And I'm seeing this in my clients, and it's heartbreaking. And then they just feel like it's only them that can do it. And it's just, oh my gosh, it's going to have.
Those that do need you find they can't rely on you now.
Yeah.
Because you are desensitized to things, stressed out, burned out, not responsive, because not because you want to be that way, because you have just got into that mental and physical state. You haven't taken care of yourself.
Right.
That now you actually can't help other people.
Right. And this is something that is happening now in our profession, and it will only continue, because I don't know if you've noticed, it's bad out there.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, it is.
So we'll talk more about these other things, because I know we're out of time.
Yeah, we are. We've come to the end of the show, and once again, Regina, we
haven't finished my talk, right?
Exactly. We had more to talk about than time we have. So
imagine that.
We'll just continue that into December.
Indeed.
So thanks for joining us, Regina. Glad to chat with you again, and I know we'll be touching base soon. So thanks for joining us, and everyone watching and listening. Stay prepared, everybody. If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe,
And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.